Thank you for being here today. I'm Jessica Rivera. I'm here to discuss to you about the principle of ethics. What is the word ethics? So, ethics is a code of moral standards of conduct for what is good and right as opposed to what is bad or wrong. So, as its simplest, ethics is a system of moral principles. They affect how people make decisions and lead their lives. It is the study of questions of morality, the search to understand what is right, wrong, good, and bad. It is the branch of philosophy that systematically studies moral ideals and goals, motives and choice, and patterns of good and bad conduct. There are components of resultant bias. So when we say bias, it means prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So first result of bias is gathering data. Teachers should remember that there's information about students' life that needs to be held confidential. Confidentiality of student information protects embarrassing personal information from disclosure. This is particularly true where the wrongful release of information about children in families might also lead to discrimination or cause prejudicial treatment. The confidential provision also protects family security. Some information that need to be kept confidential are parent information, student assessment results, grades, phone numbers, and teachers should also prioritize student security when handling login information or passwords. Next is recording data. Teachers should be extra careful when recording information about students' lives. Our education system needs data to improve outcomes for students. Educators use data to inform instruction, empower parents and communities, and help policymakers make decisions and target resources. However, we need to be careful in recording those data. We need to consider these following examples to secure data storage. First, don't store data in flash drives because they can get stolen or lost. Second, be careful when sending data in an email. Third, use a lock screen and don't leave devices unattended. And last one, only share with people that have an educational need. The third result of bias is reporting data. Teachers should realize that there are standard forms used to report students' scholastic data. All information about individual children is private and should only be shared with those staff who have a need to know. All social services, medical, and personal information about the child should be held in a safe and secure place which cannot be accessed by individuals other than school staff. That is why there are standard forms that teachers are using to report the learner's data. There are 9 ethical principles. First is the content competence. Teacher maintains a high level of subject matter knowledge and ensures that the lesson content is current, accurate, and appropriate within the student's program of studies. So this means that the teacher is responsible for maintaining or acquiring subject matter competence related to both their own interest as well as to the objectives. And teacher should also ensure the appropriateness and the representativeness of the content of the subject. Second principle is the pedagogical competence. A competent teacher is aware of alternative instructional methods or strategies and provides students with adequate opportunity to practice and receive feedback on those skills to be mastered. So, this means that a teacher should have an adequate pedagogical knowledge and skills, provides students with adequate opportunity to practice and receive feedback on those skills to be mastered. The teacher must be aware of significant differences in the learning styles of their students and, if feasible, varies her or his style of teaching accordingly, as well as the teacher must be active on the steps to stay current regarding teaching strategies that will help students learn relevant knowledge and skills and will provide equal educational opportunity for diverse groups. The third principle is dealing with sensitive topics. Topics that the students are likely to find sensitive or discomforting are dealt with an open, honest, and positive way. So this means that the teacher should acknowledge at the outset when a particular topic is sensitive and explains why it is necessary to include the curriculum. And as well as a teacher should identify his or her own perspective on the topic and compares it to alternative approaches or interpretations so as to provide students with an understanding of the complexity of the issue and the difficulty of achieving a single objective conclusion. Invites all students to state their position on the issue, sets ground rules for discussion, if it is respectful of students, even when it is necessary to disagree, and encourage students to be respectful of one another. The fourth principle is student development. The overriding responsibility of the teacher is to contribute to the intellectual development of the student and to avoid actions such as exploitation and discrimination that detract from student development. This means that the teacher is responsible for designing instruction that facilitates learning and encourage autonomy and independent thinking in students, as well as treating students with respect and dignity. The fifth principle is dual relationships with students. To avoid conflict of interest, a teacher does not enter into dual-role relationships with students that are likely to detract from student development or lead to actual or perceived favoritism on the part of the teacher. So this means that the teachers are responsible for keeping relationships with students focused on pedagogical goals and academic requirements. Teacher should avoid favoritism or unfairness, preventing risks such as that of exploitation, compromising academic standards, favoritism, or harm to student development from materializing into real or perceived conflicts of interest. The sixth principle is confidentiality. Student grades, attendance records, and private communications are treated as confidential materials. So this information can only be released with student consent or for legitimate academic purposes, or if there are reasonable grounds for believing that releasing such information will be beneficial to the student or will prevent harm to others. The seventh principle is respect for colleagues. Teachers should respect the dignity of their colleagues and works cooperatively with colleagues in the interest of fostering student development. This means that teachers interact among colleagues with respect to teaching with an overriding concern with the development of students. The eighth principle is valid assessment of students. Given the importance of assessment of student performance, teachers are responsible for taking adequate steps to ensure that the assessment of students is valid, open, fair, and congruent with the objectives. So this means that teachers should use their knowledge of assessment to select assessment techniques that are consistent with the objectives and are as reliable and valid as possible, as well as teachers should clearly communicate assessment procedures at the beginning of the course. They grade student exams, papers, and assignments carefully and fairly through the use of a rational marking system that can be communicated to students. The ninth principle is respect for institution. In the interest of student development, a teacher must be aware of and respect the educational goals, policies, and standards of the institution in which he or she teaches. So this means that teachers should uphold the educational goals and standards of the school, follow the policies and regulations pertaining to the education of students. Thank you and have a great day. I hope you have learned something from my discussion.